I saw my mother go through decades with this illness and try everything under the sun, and there was no cure. And then I did the same. No cure for me either. So I just thought, this is it. I just need to go and try and be happy and see if that's even still possible. And it was such a juxtaposition from what the last 2 years have been like. And I just started to cry. And I realized, like, I'm happy. And it was the first time I remembered being happy in a really long time.
Welcome to The Story Behind the Symptoms, a podcast from Symptomatic.me. Your host is David Clark, MD, a board-certified gastroenterologist who successfully diagnosed and treated over 7,000 patients with neuroplastic pain or illness. Each episode, we dive into our guests' life experiences to uncover the deeper causes of their symptoms. By listening to their story, you will gain insights that advance your own journey towards knowledge that becomes healing.
Hello, and welcome to the Story Behind the Symptoms podcast. I am your host, Dr. David Clark, and with me today is my guest, Raelan, who has pulled herself out of a very serious case of chronic fatigue syndrome and has an amazing story to tell. Raelan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. And first off, so I'm Raelan Agel. I'm here over in East Bay, California, Northern California. I am so honored to be here. Dr. Clark, thank you for having me. I have so much respect for the work that you do. As someone who has a long history of myself and family members facing these conditions and really struggling to find the support that we need, I can't say how much it means that you're here doing what you do. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for being with us. And Raelan, of course, has her own podcast, and people who want to learn more about her story and what she's learned from numerous experts over the years should absolutely check that out. Well, I wanted to do this podcast a little differently than I usually do. And I wanted to follow your story chronologically because I found that if we understand the roots of an illness like yours, that it facilitates healing, both for the patient and for everybody who hears this story today. And the roots of this oftentimes go back into generations, previous generations. And that's where I'd like to start today, because your own mother suffered from chronic fatigue syndrome herself. And I'm wondering if we go back to her experience as a child, whether that could have played a role in the development of her own chronic fatigue syndrome. And I think if we understand how this runs through generations, it can facilitate people healing from this.
Yeah, it goes back quite far. And it's interesting to see how my understanding of my eventual chronic fatigue syndrome has evolved over time, because at one point I thought it was, I got this virus, I never got better. And then I started expanding out, well, if I go back a few months, I can see some signs that were leading up to this. And now I realize I was just scratching the surface, because there's so much more than that leads to these conditions. So my mother, she grew up in an area of Canada called Vegreville, and it's predominantly Ukrainian immigrants. So her parents were Ukrainian immigrants. And when my daughter was a child, her mother was unwell. And of course, no one was diagnosing chronic fatigue syndrome at the time. But when we now look at it, we strongly believe that my maternal grandmother had chronic fatigue syndrome as well. So she really struggled with her 4 children. She had to hire help to take care of the children. They weren't a well-off family. This was frowned upon. The mother should have been doing all of the work. The father was cold and distant. He had 3 sons that he paid attention to, but had no time or interest in his daughter, my mother. So she didn't feel a lot of love from the one healthy parent, and then the other one was overwhelmed and just trying to keep her head above water. But she did have a sibling that she was very close to. They're about a year apart, and he suddenly died at age 11 of a brain aneurysm. So she lost her best friend in the world. And I know I'm just scratching the surface, but there was a lot going on for my mother as a child in her home growing up. Not feeling safe, not feeling cared for a lot of the times. Yeah, just way too much for a little girl to have to be dealing with and processing.
Yeah, no question about it. And then she develops chronic fatigue syndrome herself at around age 30. And as I recall, you were about age 5 at that time. why don't we continue the story from there?
Sure, yes, and very good memory. Yeah, it came on more gradually for her at about age 30. She was working full time, and that became more and more challenging, and went through the usual round of doctors who didn't really tell her much, just said things like exercise more, rest more, or it'll pass, or it's all in your head. And she just kept trying to plow through, but the more she tried to push through, the worse she got. And she eventually ended up having to quit her job. And over time, her life just got smaller and smaller. And this ended up going on for about 25 years, where she got to a point where she was housebound and often bedbound. In the rare times that she left the house, it would be by wheelchair and just for really short trips. Her life became very small, and she was severely depressed and had seen so many doctors, Western, Eastern, anything that she could find. And nothing was helping. She just got worse and worse and worse, and eventually gave up that anyone had anything for her. Like, she's like, I can't get my hopes up one more time. I've been this way for 25 years. And she eventually did end up taking her own life.
Yeah, I can only imagine the black despair that she must have been in after 25 years of progressive deterioration. So you are 5 years old when this starts. I can't even imagine what that was like for you, but why don't you share with us from your perspective what it was like to see her progressively deteriorate like that?
I'm always a little reluctant to share my experience because I'll happily do so, but my reluctance comes from, I know everyone's experience is different, and I wouldn't want a parent listening thinking, oh my goodness, this is what my child is going through. Because I don't think it's always this way. And I've interviewed many parents, and there are very different ways that this can play out. Depends a lot on the personalities of the people involved, your environment. And my mother, though I loved her dearly and she loved me, was a challenging woman when healthy. She was a force. She wanted everything done her way. We don't like to speak ill of those who have passed, but she was definitely, very selfish and demanding and had unrealistic expectations of people. So when she became unwell, it was that my whole family unit should come to a halt. And it was just my father and myself and her. We had some extended relatives who quickly started to fall away because my mom had such high expectations. Like, I call, you come over now, even if their own children were in the middle or something. My mom's like, no, I am sick. I am the priority. You get here now. And slowly, she just chased people away. So then it was just my father and I in what felt like a pressure cooker for years. It was intense. She had severe depression. She was crying a lot of the time. I grew up with messages as well of things like, be careful. Every time I got the flu, this might be the one flu that you never get better from. Take care of yourself while you're sick. So I grew up terrified of getting the flu because I could see what it turned into. And every flu that went on for more than 2 or 3 days, I'm like, is this the one that ends my life? Is this the one that ends my life? So there was just a lot of different factors going on. And my mother really wanted everything to revolve around her. She was very jealous if I spent time with my father. She felt that all family occasions should be put on hold until she could go. So like no weddings, no birthday parties, no Christmas celebrations. And this went on for 25 years. And just had a lot of, I felt, unfair demands, saying things like, if you don't spend 3 hours with me every night, this was when I was a teenager, I'm going to kill myself. I need you here, or I'm not going to be able to be alive, and I shouldn't have a boyfriend. And so there were a lot of stressors on top of all of the more obvious ones of her being unwell and all the stress she was going through and not being able to find her answers. But then the way it rippled over to my father and to myself, we were just all in survival mode, and none of us knew what we were doing. And we were just trying to get through.
Yeah, that is almost unimaginable, the level of different pressures that you were experiencing at that time. But I think one of the outcomes of that would be that you would not be able to pay any attention to your own needs, and you would not be able to pay any attention to your own emotions, that everything would have to be focused on your mother, and you're going to completely lose yourself in that. And you're also going to be on a treadmill that you never get off. The amount of focus and intensity and hard work that would be required in that situation, and that you would be forced to learn from an age when you would have really no choice about how you lived your life. The assumptions that would be forced on you about yourself in that circumstance would be overwhelming, that you would have to be putting everything about yourself essentially on the shelf. And when you acquire those understandings at such a young age, even when you leave home and are out on your own, those carry on. End up with a focus on the needs of everybody else, including close personal relationships, boyfriends, or whatever it is. And that's not sustainable indefinitely. So let's pick up the story after you've left home, and what kind of a lifestyle were you leading at that time?
I think I went a complete 180 after having what felt like a whole lifetime up until that point, completely revolving around my mother and just having that intense pressure of her expectations. So when I left the house and I moved out, I started to spend a lot less time with her, and I was really adamant that I would never get CFS, and this came from no logic or reason, just stubbornness. And I thought if I just, nope, and I reminded myself all the ways that her and I were different, and like, we don't even look the same, like that matters, but the things that you can tell yourself when you're young. And I also thought if I just moved fast enough, it could never slow me down. So I went full tilt. I was in school. I was working. I was always juggling, multiple jobs or going to school, active social life, out partying on the weekends, traveling, lots of traveling, like extensive, like 5-week trips out places, touring Europe. And then I'd come back and go straight to work and just go, 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 go. And my only self-care, if we can call it that, was extreme anxiety and insecurity about my body. So I weighed my food and worked out 97 times a week. So I would look good enough to be a valuable human being in the world, and not about anything about longevity or really worrying about what's happening inside my body. So I was so disconnected in my 20s. I was just moving fast, not giving myself time to think about anything, and just in denial about virtually everything.
Yeah, the using exercise to give yourself a sense of your own value is very telling about where your self-esteem was at that time. That, when you are perpetually unable to meet your mother's needs, when you're perpetually unable to do anything to stop your mother's progression in her illness, that makes people feel like they're second rate, or they're not measuring up, or they're worthless. And exercise can be a way of, and focus on the body can be a way of trying to counteract that, trying to have some kind of foundation for believing you have a right to exist. But the fact that you were exercising so intensely for so many hours a day just to feel like you deserved some space on this planet is very telling about where your self-esteem was at that point. But I'm curious, that traveling to Europe sounds like fun. Were you finally able to get some joy from that? Because, so many of my patients, they really struggle with taking time for their own joy.
Yeah, I loved to travel, but I traveled in the exact same way that I did everything else in life. So I left on that trip with a binder I'd put together of like the 8,000 things we needed to do at each stop that we went to. I made it not fun. It was fun, but you would think that I was trying my hardest to ensure it was more like work. But no, it was a good time, but it was also very exhausting, and went to multiple places. So we didn't stay in one place very long. So it was just everywhere you were, you felt like you had to put in a 12-hour day to see everything and then start all over the next day. So it was a fun trip, but exhausting. And then within days of getting home, we had a wedding in Mexico. So we had to turn right back around again. And then we were 10 days in Mexico. And it was actually after that trip, those concurrent trips, it ended up being almost 6 weeks back to back, and where my body finally just shut down.
Wow. So even after experiences that should have been enjoyable, you were essentially on a treadmill even on vacation, because so many of my patients, that's what they do. Their reaction to the experiences they had as kids puts them on a treadmill of accomplishment and achievement and work and focus on the needs of others that they just have no way to stop. So in your case, it even got to the point where that was happening on vacation. Before we get to what happened after that, I'm curious about the relationship to the timing of your mother's death. How soon after she'd passed did you develop the CFS?
8 months.
8 months. Probably not a coincidence
Probably not.
either. All right. So what happened then? What happened to your body after living in fear of getting the virus that would finally give you CFS? Is that what happened?
It is exactly what happened. I got back from that extensive travel trip and had a really bad flu, like the kind where you can't get out of bed, you can't function. And I knew that it was going to be really bad because I had just taken a whole lot of time off from work and maxed out my vacation time. And then I got back and I had to take a full week of sick time because I just couldn't get up. But it just felt like a really rough flu. And I thought, well, it makes sense. We always say, oh, when you're really, really busy and then you finally stop moving, everything. I don't know if there's any truth to that, but it definitely seems to happen. So I didn't worry about it too much other than missing work. And then I started to feel a bit better. I went back to work, whether this is relevant or not, but they were giving out flu vaccines. So I worked in a hospital. I think I just said that. So I got a flu vaccine. I just had this horrible flu. I thought, okay, I don't want another one of those. And then the next day I started feeling worse again. And I knew nothing about vaccines, and not saying the vaccine caused any of this, but just the next day I started feeling rough again. And it kept going for a few days, and then I'd feel a little bit better. And I had sort of concluded I had some strange flu that would come and go. Like I'd feel worse, and then I'd start to feel better. I'm like, okay, I'm good again. And then I'd feel worse, and I'd need more time off work. And it was just really perplexing. I'd never gone through anything like that in my life. I had no idea what was happening to my body.
Okay. And then eventually it began to progress and got worse to the point where you were not able to work anymore. Had you finished your master's degree at that point, or were you still in school?
I had only recently started it. So it is a distance program I was doing in addition to my full-time job as a social worker. And yeah, I very quickly had to stop doing everything. I went to my GP. She did all the tests. She told me I was fine. I couldn't work. I had no sick time left. I was taking time off without pay. I asked her to sign some paperwork so I could take a short-term disability leave just until I figured this out. She pretty much laughed at me and said, how am I going to sign this? There's nothing wrong with you, and just sent me on my way. So I felt so lost. But yeah, it devolved quickly for me where I had to stop working, stop working out, stop traveling, stop socializing. And I was confined mostly to my house and most of my time in bed or on the couch with extreme fatigue was how it started, but then how it goes, all these other weird symptoms started coming up, and suddenly it seemed like every bite of food I put in my mouth made me feel worse, and I had all these food intolerances that came out of nowhere, and I couldn't sleep, and just cognitive issues, the brain fog, we call it, memory and thinking, and just all sorts of stuff. And and despite seeing what my mother went through, I refused to think fatigue syndrome. I'm like, no, this is not that. We're going to find out what it is, but it's definitely not that.
Yeah, I can only imagine how frightening that prospect would have been after seeing your mother struggle with it for 25 years. But unfortunately, you did keep getting worse. You tried a lot of different treatments, as many people do.
I did. I connected with an integrative medicine doctor, functional medicine doctor, because Canadian healthcare system is, I was in Canada at the time, a little bit different. So we have what is nationally covered, and you go to your GP and your GP says you're fine. That's kind of the end of the line. So because they refer you to specialists if they think it's needed. So I found a private doctor that was very expensive, but willing to help me. For a couple of years, I worked with him, and I was taking about $2,000 in supplements every single month. I did thousands of dollars worth of tests. They diagnosed me with eventually chronic fatigue syndrome, and then also chronic Lyme disease, but then also was told that there are all sorts of things going wrong in my body, like adrenal fatigue and yeast overgrowth and leaky gut syndrome and hormonal imbalances. Like I was taking hormone injections and B12 shots. I was taking antivirals. I was taking large doses of antibiotics for the Lyme. And I just had this really exhausting, expensive, extensive healing protocol that I followed to the letter because I thought this doctor knows his stuff. He's really smart. What do I know? So I just did it all. But it didn't really seem to get me very far, unfortunately.
Yeah, we in the healthcare profession are taught that physical symptoms are caused by organ diseases or structural damage. And unfortunately, only a handful of us learn that there's a whole other category of brain-generated symptoms that can be anywhere and everywhere in the body and that have a completely different diagnostic and treatment approach. But if your training is that it's got to be an organ disease or structural damage, then you try to make everybody's symptoms fit into that box, and you choose a box that seems to be the best fit for a particular patient's symptoms, and then you treat them for that condition, whatever it is, and then you get frustrated, and the patient gets frustrated that the treatments are not working. And that's one of the characteristics of neuroplastic symptoms is that the treatment that you expect to work doesn't in the way that you expect. All right, so the situation continued to deteriorate, and as I recall, after a couple of years, you moved back to your home.
I did, yes. My husband and I when I finally had enough time to put my head above water, I was feeling a little bit better, not significantly, but enough where we could have a conversation. We realized that our marriage was over, so we sold our house. I moved back home with my dad. He'd never been able to bring him to use the master bedroom where my mom was sleeping, where my mom actually was found dead. But I was desperate, and it was the biggest house in the room, so I moved back into her room and was severely depressed. And I'd tried everything that existed to get well. I'd seen so many different types of specialists and alternative medicine, like you name it. I pretty much tried it. I bought all the devices. I read all the books. I was reading about how to cure yourself from cancer and diabetes, and I was doing the juicing and the fasting and the cleansing and everything. You could do the dry skin brushing. I bought a infrared sauna. I bought a mini trampoline because that was supposed to help you. Not that I could really jump on it.
Yeah, not having the energy. Yeah, the supplement and device industries are tens of billions of dollars. And it's people like yourself who don't have an organ disease or structural damage and are searching for answers. They go online and they find these supplements and these devices and people wearing white coats who are advocating for them. And, what are you supposed to do? But, they give you hope. The hope doesn't last, but it ends up being very profitable for the companies that are making these things. Well, that I can barely imagine what it must have been like to find yourself in exactly the place that your mother passed, and to have very similar symptoms to what led her to despair. How long were you there before something finally began to turn around?
I was there, I don't know, 6 to 8 months, and severely depressed and suicidal. And I felt, I was the ripe old age of 31 or 2. Like I felt like no one would ever want me again at this age. I'm going to be single. I tried going back to work for just a few hours a day. I couldn't do it. So I think I can't work. I can't date. I'm here living with my dad, who was also severely depressed. I'm like, there's zero hope for my future. I saw my mother go through decades with this illness and try everything under the sun, and there was no cure. And then I did the same. No cure for me either. So I just thought, this is it. So the way I approached my severe depression actually ended up saving me, because when my husband and I sold our house, the housing market had gone up. So we made a bit of money. So I had some money sitting in the account, and I'd always loved to travel. So I thought, I'm not dying with this money in the bank. I laugh now because it sounds a bit silly, but at the time it really kept me alive. And I wasn't up for traveling, but I thought, if I can just get on a plane And if I have to crawl around someplace else, I will. Or if I'm just in bed all day long, I'll be in a different bed in a different country. So I just bought myself a ticket to Thailand. I landed on, and
about as far from your part of Canada as it's possible to go. All right, before we go from Thailand, I just have to ask. I mean, so many of my patients in states of despair and who've been made to feel like they are virtually worthless as human beings. There must have been, some spark in there that thought you deserved better somehow. Did you have a sense of that, or can you determine where that might have come from? Because your mother clearly did not have that little spark that, hauled you out of bed and onto an airplane that went literally halfway across the world. Something inside you pulled you out of that situation. Any idea what that was or where it came from?
I think it was the first time in my life where I ever felt free. Despite being so hopeless and suffering, I never felt like I had a lot of choices. And you go to school, you go to university, you marry the guy you've been dating for a couple of years. We were on the path to having kids. I didn't want to live in Edmonton. I kept trying to find ways for us to go elsewhere. It didn't seem like it was, I just felt trapped in my life. And now here I was, suddenly no strings attached, money in the bank, and these things that I've been fantasizing about were at my fingertips, like to go to someplace exotic like Thailand. So I thought, if I'm going to die, and I was still quite convinced at this time that I was not going to choose to live very long, but I just wanted to go out and feel some joy, some of that adventure that I had been craving. And that was really exciting to me. So I think that's what it was. In time, I found hope that I would fully recover and get past this. And that came while I was on this trip. But initially it was I just need to go and try and be happy and see if that's even still possible.
Yeah. I mean, that's such a powerful insight that you had essentially been trapped since you were 5 years old by everything that you had to deal with was controlling your life, controlling your emotions, controlling how you thought about yourself. And in a way, I guess there's a certain amount of freedom when you hit rock bottom the way you did, that there's nothing that's going to be worse than where you were. So why not be worse in Thailand? And if you're there and nothing changes and you run out of money, that might be the end. But at least you were willing to make that one last try to give yourself something. And that is so critically important. So many of my patients they find it a struggle to take some time for their own joy. And you were not able to do that until you absolutely got to the lowest possible point. That's what it took to say, you know what? I'm going to do something. And all credit to you, because not everybody can manage that. All right. So what happened in Thailand? Assume you got to a hotel room and you could have been just as flat on your back in the hotel room as you were at home.
Yeah. Yeah, it was it's a challenging thing to sum up. So yeah, I got to Thailand late at night, basically just stayed in my hotel room. I was very cautious because I had this idea about it. I only had this specific amount of usable energy every day. So I would just go out for a little bit, a couple hours, some gentle sightseeing, back to my room.
So no big binder this time.
No. Oh, no plan. The complete opposite. I had a hotel room booked and I planned to stay for 6 months, but I didn't even have day one planned. I kind of don't know what I'm going to do. So yeah, very different.
What a radical difference for you. The wheels are clearly turning in there.
It was so incredible. I'd never felt so free from myself and from everyone else and expectations in my life, where it's just I don't answer to anybody. I don't even care what anyone thinks about the decisions that I'm making. I'm just, what do I want to eat today? Where do I want to go tomorrow? Am I going to stay here a week? Am I going to stay here 2 days? It was just this id like a kid in a candy store, like, what's next?
You never got to be a kid. And when people are children, mostly they just play all day long. But it turns out that playing is an essential human skill because you find out who you are from that. When you learn about your emotions. My presumption is that when you first landed in Thailand, you were going to find out who Raelan is for the first time.
Very well said. Yeah.
So how did that go?
It was interesting. Just by being there, as I started to wander around, and I have this one story I've told a couple times, but I went to that beach in Thailand where the movie The Beach was filmed with Leonardo DiCaprio. It's this like crescent beach with the, ocean overflowing. And I went there and I stood there in the water with my feet in that clear water, looking out on Leonardo DiCaprio's beach. And it was such a juxtaposition from what the last 2 years have been like. And I just started to cry. And I realized, I'm happy. And it was the first time I remembered being happy in a really long time. And I just stood there in the ocean and cried. And I still had CFS and every day was still hard. But now there was some joy. So I'm like, okay, this is doable. Symptoms are doable if there's some joy in there too. So I kept going, kept sightseeing little bits that I could enjoy every day. And my symptoms started getting better. It wasn't the 100% fix, but it gave me another lump up. I stopped trying to recover in that time. I stopped, fixating on my symptoms so much. And I made a decision to never talk about it. So anyone that I met, I wouldn't tell them I had chronic fatigue syndrome. I'd go do everything I had to hide it, which wasn't hard because I didn't hang out with people for more than a couple hours. And then I'd go back to the room and I'd rest. So that shift of focusing on joy, of not talking about my symptoms and stopping trying to fix myself were some key puzzles that got me up kind of one more level in my recovery.
You were able to shift your focus from your symptoms to your joy. And as I say, that joy is an essential human skill. If you don't know how to do it, then you're on a treadmill you never get off until your body forces you to get off. And this is what I see in many of my patients with fatigue or with other physical symptoms, is that when they are constantly pressing forward with every grain of energy that they have and completely devoted to the needs of everybody else in their world, and they can't do the same for themselves, and they can't put themselves on the list of those they care for, then sooner or later, the only thing that is going to stop them from that lifestyle is their body, that is going to force them off the treadmill and is not going to let them get back on the treadmill until they know how to do joy. And, you're making that shift. Figuring it out on your own is remarkable. All right, I want to hear more. Where did it go from there?
We're almost there. So I existed like that for a few years, actually. I backpacked for quite a while, and then I found jobs that allowed me to work remotely and not have to be in the office too much so I could make it work. Every single day was hard still. I never had a single day where I didn't have symptoms, and I never had a single day where I wasn't worried about how am I going to get through the things I need to get done? Like, I have a meeting at this time. I'm always so tired at that time. What if someone finds me out? Because I still wasn't telling anybody about my condition. But I went on like this for years, and I made friends, and I had a life, and I traveled, and I had, a few hours of usable energy at most days. Sometimes I get stuck in that push crash cycle. I'd, do a lot and then be laid out for a while. So it was stressful, but it was no longer that torture chamber that was Canada, where all I did was suffer and be depressed and try and fix myself and cry. Now I felt a little bit better and I could do some things and I had some joy. So that was the next phase. But then I came to realize how hard life still really was, like how I never had one easy day. And I started getting really exhausted with that. I don't know how much longer I can keep picking myself up for hard day after hard day after hard day, even if there's joy in there. So I realized I gotta get back all in and I need to figure this thing out, and I need to put this behind me for good. And I'd had some ideas over the years of things that I thought would help, but while juggling work and just life, I never felt I had the space to devote to them. So it's very fortunate that my boyfriend at the time, who is now my husband, Jeffrey, suggested I move in with him and quit my job so that I could just focus on getting well. And that's what I did. It took about 1.5-ish, 2 years to be fully 100% back, but I did get there.
And what did you do during that 1.5, 2 years that was different, that helped you get there?
It's interesting because if you would have asked me at the end of that 2 years, I would have told you a very different answer than I'm going to tell you now, because my understanding has evolved completely. So my approach was still that I had a very broken body. This was my mindset, but I firmly believed in the body's ability to heal itself. So I wasn't looking for surgery or pills or supplements or anything like that. I was just reading about how do you support your body. So things like, okay, you need sunlight. You need to get your circadian rhythm in order, get out some early morning sun, get out in the afternoon, support your body's detox mechanisms, because I always felt like I was just flooded in this pool of poison. My body just didn't seem to get rid of things. So things like massages and cold water immersion and cold showers, I really did. And then I'd read books about fasting and how people, cured themselves from cancer from fasting. So I started.
Still focused on the body.
Yeah.
One thing after another.
So, and I became a whole food plant-based diet. So I went 100% vegan, like healthy vegan. Because again, diet, what's that saying? We always say, let thy food be thy medicine. I still believe food is important, but so you see, I'm listing a lot of things that can generally be helpful. And at the time, I would have said these were curing my CFS. But when I look back, I think they were things just generally making me healthier at the time. But there were only a few core things that were actually addressing my CFS and getting past it. And one of those things was I had noticed while I had been traveling that when I could do gentle physical activities that I liked, I would get a little bit stronger. And over time, I could do a little bit more and a little bit more. I get a little bit of symptoms, but I would get stronger. So I believe that was going to be a piece of it. So I started this gradually expanding movement program, just 1 minute a day of just moving your arms. It wasn't about building strength. It was just, today I'm going to move my arms. And then I might get a little bit of symptoms the next day. Then I do it again. And then the next week, if I felt okay with it, I do 2 minutes and maybe just push off a wall gently. And that would give me some symptoms. But now 1 minute no longer gave me symptoms. Now it took 2 minutes. So it went on like this week after week. Then I could do 3, then I could do 4. And within a year, I was in the gym and I could, push hard to do any strength training that I wanted. And at the time, I thought it was about building my body back up. But I now understand it from, what was really going on. It was about the nervous system. It was about the fear. It was about my brain. It was like gradual re-exposure therapy. It was like phobia treatment, movement is okay. And a piece of that.
As long as you have some joy along the way. Yeah, that it's not the intensity that you had back in your 20s.
Yes. And also that this movement program would bring symptoms up. And even though no one that I could find was talking about this at the time, I just came to accept that they're a part of the process. I'm going to have to feel a little worse every once in a while to get better. I'm going to push myself. Some symptoms will come up. That's okay. I'm not going to panic. I know it's a part of it. And the next day I'll be able to do more. And it's just going to keep taking more and more and more to bring symptoms on. And it's going to keep expanding my world to the point where I could do all things and they no longer brought on symptoms. So that was a big one. But then I also did a lot of work on just my emotions and a lot of journaling, unpacking things that I've been carrying around. I made a list of every big and small T trauma I thought I had in my life, the ones I've been pushing down and not wanting to look at. And just very slowly over time, I started really journaling about those and trying to get to the bottom of what was happening there. Got some counseling. Plus, I had the support of my husband. So having a loving person in the home who cared for me. So all of these things, I don't think anymore it was the fasting or the vegan diet or the lymphatic drainage massage or whatever I was crediting at the time, which can all be great. But
yeah, they're body focused rather than mind focused. Well, the emotions you mentioned, I mean, those are among the most difficult for my patients to even become consciously aware of. Can you talk a little bit about which emotions were the most important and how you came to consciously connect with them and feel them?
I started by thinking about what am I still carrying around? And I knew that just by clocking in my days and weeks, what things keep showing up in my head? Like this moment of being bullied when I was in middle school, or like, how is that still taking up space? I'd write it down. A lot of it went back to childhood and being a teenager, things that I did that I thought were so shameful. And I held so much shame around them for my behavior when I was a teenager. So I started writing that stuff down. And it was just anything that I noticed that I was still carrying. To me, that meant it was something that I was going to need to unpack and work through. So then I would just write and write and write and get to the bottom of it. Why do I feel this way? What brought it on? And also, I would address how I wish I would have addressed it in the moment. So I'd take a moment to say, okay, if I could go back now, me, this is what Raelan me would do. This is what she would say to that bully. Or this is what she would say to her 17-year-old self about these shameful things, just trying to, put it to bed. And it really did help a lot.
Okay. Yeah. One of the areas of a person's life that can be the most challenging is how you think about your own value, because so many of my patients were made to feel like they weren't good enough, or in some cases that they were worthless, or that they could never, ever solve all the problems that were put in front of them as kids. And so they carry this burden of shame or feeling second rate for so long into their adult years. And it affects the kinds of relationships they're able to form. It affects their ability to set boundaries with toxic people. And it can be one of the most difficult ones to change, to shift into a more appropriate self-image as someone who overcame tremendous adversity and should be incredibly proud of the heroic perseverance that she showed to make it through everything that you were confronted with. How did you navigate that, or are you still navigating that?
How am I navigating
Self-esteem, your own feelings about your value as a person. In your 20s, you had to exercise to extremes to feel like you deserve to exist. And I'm sure that that's no longer the case.
Yeah, I've come a long way. I wish I could say it's 100% taken care of, but I don't know what number I'd put on it. But I am, like most people, I'm sure you find that go through these journeys, they come through the other end completely different, having a better sense of themselves, of what's important to them, of their own boundaries, releasing some of the people-pleasing things I still do struggle with a little bit is the worth tied to achievement, or I still have trouble revving myself down in areas, but I'm working on it. My goal in life is not to be a workaholic, so it's a journey. Let's say that.
Well, when you acquire it as a basic assumption about yourself at such an early age, I mean, the brain gets wired to think of itself this way, and it is a journey to try to shift those circuits. One aspect of that journey actually is, and this will be relevant to a number of people watching this, is when they meet their Jeffrey, they can feel initially like an imposter. They can feel like, why does this wonderful person want to be with me? And are they going to figure out one day that I'm not worth their time and up and leave? Did you go through any?
Good question. Yes, definitely. I mean, in the beginning, I was trying to hide it from him like I was trying to hide it from everybody else, but you can only do that for so long. So I played around with easing him into what's been going on. And I think because I was somewhat functional at the time and we could still, lost my earbud, we could still, do fun things and travel and go for dinners. He definitely saw I had limitations. I needed to rest a lot. I needed to take days off. But he was surprisingly okay and supportive of it. And perhaps because by this point I firmly believed that I could recover. He hadn't been there for the last 8 years, so maybe it was easier for him to believe. I'm like, yeah, this is only short term. Where I did find it created some challenges is that I moved in with him and I didn't have any money and I wasn't working, and our relationship was great, but it can create a different dynamic, sort of like a power dynamic. Not that he ever used it against me, but that feeling like, I don't want to leave this relationship, but what if I did? Like, I don't think I have an option. I'm still not well. I quit my job. I don't have any money. And there's always, I could feel a bit of that on his end as well. Like, once she gets better, once she gets a job, like, is she just sticking around because she needs the support? And I don't think any of this was outwardly said, but I'm confident we are both feeling these things. So I think there's a lot of stuff going on when you've got someone in a relationship who is unwell.
Yeah, well, and it plays into the self-esteem issue as well. If you're carrying that doubt about your value,
yes,
it's going to make everything you just said that much more challenging. Okay, let's bring ourselves up to today. Are you still having symptoms? And if so, how do you cope with them?
I no longer have chronic symptoms. So I think that's the best any of us can aim for, because we're human beings and we're going to get symptoms for the rest of our lives. And our brain and our nervous system, we want them to keep working and we want them to keep alerting us to things. So like I think I was saying, before we started this call, if I'm not taking care of myself, if I'm stressed out, if I've got different things going on, I'll start getting intense lower back pain, which I've never had.
Which you never had before.
No, never. And I can get it to go away really quickly using these, different tools and strategies that I've learned over the years. So, I mean, yes, little symptoms pop up and sometimes they'll even feel a little CFS-y, like, oh, this is familiar, but it never stays. I'm never worried, and it's never anything that isn't alleviated by either some nervous system work or a good night's sleep. So I'm doing well.
Can you use the symptoms as a form of communication from your mind that your mind is distressed or not happy about something?
Absolutely. I talk to them all the time. Like, okay, I hear you. What's going on? What are you trying to tell me with this one? And I can almost always hear an answer. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, just know that I've got that taken care of. Thank you for letting me know in such a gentle way and not laying me out flat in bed. Message received. No need for any more warning bells. Thank you for taking care of me. But yeah, I have full-on conversations with symptoms now.
And what a amazing difference from where you were in your early 30s. It's just an incredible transformation that you have brought about. And I think it's going to give hope to everybody who hears this. Thank you for sharing this in such detail and making it so clear, the process that you had to go through and the tremendous success that you had is truly remarkable. Before we close, do you have any questions for me or anything else that you would like to share with the viewers?
I always want to say that I know when you go through these journeys, it can feel like nothing's ever going to change, or perhaps you're the one person that none of this applies to, or you've had it too long, or your symptoms are too severe, or maybe you do have some physical structural abnormalities in your body. By the way, virtually everybody does, so that doesn't necessarily mean what we think it does. But after interviewing so many people, almost 250 people now, I have seen that there is no one who is too sick, is too far gone, who has had too severe symptoms. And they look, well, what about mine came on with these 9 different specific scenarios? Does that mean I have no chance? And in my experience, for what it's worth of hearing people recover, there's no case that is hopeless. So I know it can feel that way, and you don't have to have a smile on your face every day. Right, rah, rah, but just find ways to keep picking yourself back up, watch the recovery stories. And I think the magic happens when you don't give up. because you might just be one video away or one book away or one doctor's visit away from that big insight that changes your whole trajectory. So keep going. You've got this.
Yeah. No, healing can be going on in the background, and you may not be consciously aware of the fact that your brain circuits are rewiring themselves and that you're actually making progress. But outwardly, things may not be seeming to change very much. And I have no doubt that you were going through a process like that after you moved back home when you were so ill, that things were happening in your central nervous system that led you to that point of, not following the path of your mother, but saying, I'm going to Thailand. And that only happens if there had been a significant amount of healing that had gone on, even though it was invisible. And I've had patients who were absolutely seemingly hopeless. One woman, 79 years of abdominal pains. Another patient at the other end of the age spectrum, a teenager whom I was asked to see on her 70th day in the hospital, getting morphine around the clock. These were seemingly patients that were never going to get better, and yet both of them did with this same kind of approach. So it's what the brain can do to the body is absolutely remarkable, but the brain's capacity for healing is equally remarkable. Thank you so much, Raelan. I really am completely grateful for everything that you've shared today. It's been a wonderful discussion, and I know everybody who sees this is going to learn from it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Clark. I've learned so much from you, and I have now new insights about my own journey, which is incredible. So I really appreciate it, and just all the work that you do for the millions and millions of people out there, all of us being told there's no hope. When you say, yes, there is hope.
Yes, there is.